We had this idea. We go to camp and we have this incredible experience. If you weren't with us at camp, I hope you come next year because camp is honestly, truly my favorite time of the year. But here's the thing. You go to camp and there's this phrase that a lot of people use. It's called camp high. And what it means is you go up on this mountain or you get away from people, you do this, you do that, you get away from real life, and then things seem easier when you're at camp, right? Things seem like they're just coming together, like, oh, I finally got it figured out. Like, when I get home, everything's perfect. But then we come home, and things aren't perfect. You see, we come home, and everything we experience is real and authentic and true, but yet nothing changed here. You see, we go to camp and we create these incredible bonding moments with our small group and our leader, and then we come home and we realize that we don't get to be with them 7 days a week, 24/7. See, we go to camp, we drive 13 hours to get there, we have all these amazing memories, and we have these quiet times where we get to sit in the woods up against a tree, and we get to stare at God and ask Him a question. We get to draw in our journal, we get to do whatever we can to communicate with God, and then we come home, and we don't have another moment of quiet until next summer camp. So I had this idea. It was, what do we do now? So we get home from camp, and what now? I mean, I don't for a moment think that anybody who went with us, the experiences that you had, the moments that you had, are false. I don't think anybody went there with the wrong intentions. I think we went there to experience something. For some of us, it was to grow closer to our friends, for have a really good time with them, and that's not wrong. But I think for most of us, we had an encounter with God. We had a moment. We had an experience. But again, I'll ask the question, what now? Now that we're home, now that life kicked us in the teeth the day we got back, now that our parents are still fighting, now that our brother and sister still aren't at home, now that school's about to start and I failed last year, what now? Does any of it at camp matter? Should I go to camp for a week when that's only 58 days out of the year? Did the math wrong. But does it matter? I mean, it's just 7 days, right? Like nothing changed, so what's the point? See, if you weren't at camp, here's what we talked about. We dove into the book of Daniel. And if you know this story, if you were at camp, hopefully you heard it and know it. If you weren't, let me kind of summarize it for you. Daniel was an incredible guy in the Old Testament. He went through some things, and he also had some friends that go by, anybody remember? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they go through these trials and tribulations and these moments where they get to choose to stand firm in their faith or walk away from it all and live. Walk away from it all and live. You see, the reason that we picked that for camp is because, you see, life gets us down. So we go to camp. We have this incredible experience. We get to bond together. We get to grow closer to God. But then if you remember in this story, they get thrown into a furnace. In Daniel chapter 3, verse 16, it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to King Nebuchadnezzar. He said, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. See, if you weren't at camp, here's what's happening. King Nebuchadnezzar shows up in their country, takes over, says, you're going to worship this golden statue. And they said, no, we will only worship our one true God that we believe in, that we know is the one true God. And they were so certain of this. They were so positive that what they were doing was right. They were willing to die. And they were saying, hey, God will deliver us from it. God will bring us out. Maybe they meant that physically. Maybe they meant that for eternity. We don't really know, but it says deliver us from it. But it says even if we do not get delivered from it, even if we don't come out of this, we still will not worship because this is what we believe. And I think for so many of us, when we're at camp, man, we're just like these guys. We're all in. We're ready to go. We're ready to rock. We got our fists up, ready to fight. But then we come home. And you don't have to raise your hand. But how many of us, we get home, and in the few days we've been home, in a week, We've already gone the opposite direction. We forgot everything we experienced at camp, and we kept living the life that we had before we went up on the mountain. I'm going to raise my hand right now. It's hard. It's hard work. It's not easy. Like we tried to say this over and over at camp. Life didn't change when we were up there. For those of you that didn't go to camp, nothing changed this week, right? Like the world still was there. The people who are getting you down were still there. The people who don't support you were still there. The people who let you down were still there. So what now? What now that we're home? What now that we have experienced God in this incredible way, yet we have to live our life continuing to push forward amidst all of these troubles? You see, as we sang that song, I'm actually going to grab Johnny's music sheet really quick. Hopefully I put it back so I don't forget. You see, we picked this song actually at camp. It wasn't something we really thought about ahead of time, but there was a moment, if you were there midweek, I got to talk, and it was a really, really emotional time for me. It was really tough. Curtis Williams was so nice to me. He walked up to me after, he said, "Bro, I saw you almost cry." Yeah, he saw that. It was a really hard time for me. You see, if you went to camp and you didn't experience what I just described, that's okay. If you don't feel like you experienced God up on that mountain, that's okay. If you experienced probably one of the hardest weeks of your life, that's okay. Because I'm right there with you. I love camp, and I would never change what happened that week. It was a hard time for me. But God got to speaking to me. It was a morning, I'm meeting with our leaders, and we were supposed to talk about the day, and we were supposed to say, hey, here's what we're going to do this week and today and later. And I just had this moment where God was talking to me, and he said, stop for a moment. Don't talk. Just listen. And we started listening to this song. It's called Another in the Fire by Hillsong United. You guys should absolutely put that on repeat. But the chorus goes like this. There was another in the fire standing next to me. See, this song was written in a time of the guy that wrote this. His son had just gone through some health things, was just diagnosed with some stuff. And he began to wonder if God was there. And in the midst of it, he reads Daniel, and he reads through this, and he remembers the story that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego say, we're not giving up. We're going to go into the furnace, and whatever happens, happens because God is with us. And they get thrown in. Do you guys remember the next part of the story? After they get thrown in. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. The chorus, there was another in the fire standing next to me. There was another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there's a cross that bears the burden where another died for me. You see, it was so incredible that for me, I look back and I go, how did I not think of this song? But I want to encourage you to do is in the moments where you feel like you're alone, where you feel like there's nobody helping, where you feel like nobody is encouraging you, where you feel like you're just falling apart, there's a cross that bears the burden where another died for me. You see, right now on our weekends, we're going through the book of John. And the book of John is one of the Gospels where it's the life of Jesus. And if you're new to church, or if you've been in church a long time, here's a reminder of how this book goes. Jesus took the place of our sin. Jesus took the place of the things that you've done wrong in a life where he did nothing wrong. And he died on that cross for us. He went up on that cross knowing I don't deserve this, yet I love you enough that I'm going to die a way that none of you should ever die, that I shouldn't die, but I'm willing to do it for you. So in those moments where you feel like life is punching you in the gut, where people are just saying you can't do it, and you feel alone, remember, like we talked about at camp, there is another in the fire with you. You're not in this alone. You see, as much as I want to say, me, Kelsey, David, your small group leaders, we're always going to be here for you, the honest truth is we won't be. As much as you love your best friend, they're not always going to be there for you. As much as you might love your parents, they're not always going to be there for you. We could go on and list all the people who might not be there for you someday. But here's what I will guarantee, put my name on it, stamp it, seal it, approve it. God will be there for you. In the midst of the most difficult season of your life, where you look back and you go, there's no shot God was there, I want you to really look and open your eyes to those moments. See, I know for me, when I look back at the most difficult times of my life, when my parents got divorced, when my dad went to rehab any of the 10 times, when we moved from Oregon with all my family to Arizona, when my wife had difficulties in our marriage. You see, in the moment, I'm telling you, it's not always easy to see where God's working. In the midst of those moments where you go, there is no shot on God's green earth that anybody is here with me. I'm alone. I'm sitting in my room, lights out, and I am done with this. When you look back on those moments, here's what I'm guaranteeing you. If you look at it with open eyes and don't look at it from just the anger that you feel, which is justifiable, when you look at it with open eyes and a clear heart, you'll see where God showed up and changed things for you. You'll see where God was walking right alongside you through that and said, I know this is going to hurt. I know it's going to burn. But when you come out of this, you're going to be ready. You're going to be on to the next thing that's I'm preparing you for right now. Here's another thing that we oftentimes forget, because I know that this story, that thinking of how God walks through us in our difficult times, a lot of you out there, you might be listening, but you don't believe it. And I get it. But you have to remember, all the bad things that happen on this earth are a result of a couple things. One, our sin. You see, if we lived perfect lives, if generations before us, and I know it's easy to blame Adam and Eve and go, oh, if they didn't eat it, we'd be fine. But let's be honest, you'd probably eat it too, right? But you see, the life that we live, the things that we go through are not God saying, hey, let me do this to you. It's a result of what we have done by God giving us a free world, a free life to make choices for ourselves. And yet none of us have lived a perfect life. The other thing to remember is that this world is the enemy's territory. This world is where Satan reigns, where Satan lives, where Satan gets to do what he wants. And so when you go through those hard times, I don't want you to look and go, God, why are you doing this? You see, God's with you, walking alongside you. But God didn't cause that to happen. And I know that's so frustrating to think about. I know it's so difficult to wrap our minds around. It is still taking me years to truly believe that in the midst of those moments. But the bottom line, this main idea I want you guys to have as we go to small groups tonight, and there's not set questions for your leaders. I know a lot of times we say, hey, we're going to go through this stuff, and this is how I want you guys to talk. Tonight is simply talking about when we go through the fire, how do we trust that God is there? You see, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it's not like they walked up to the fire and said, hey, hang on, before we go in, hang on. God, you got me? We good? And they stuck their toe in. Oh, it's still hot. Let me wait for it to cool down. And then, no. They looked that king in the face. They looked that enemy in the face. They looked that person who said, you're done. You're over with. And they said, I don't care what you do. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you force upon me. I'm going to make my choice. And my choice is to believe that God is with us. My choice is to believe that no matter what is about to happen once you open that furnace and throw us in, no matter what happens, whether we die in a fiery flame or whether we somehow survive or it doesn't matter. This is what I believe, this is what I know is true, and I'm going to walk alongside. So tonight as we go into small groups, that's all we're talking about. How do we, as we leave camp, what now? As we left camp, and if you didn't go to camp, that's okay. As we live life, How do we, in the midst of walking into the furnace, trust, believe, and live a life that shows that God is with us? See, the other part of this battle is when you do jump in that furnace, you can't do it with doubt. When you jump in that furnace, when you say, I'm in, you can't, in the back of your mind, go, I don't know if this is going to work. 50-50 shot. You can't think that. You see, faith is us truly believing that God will be there. And like I said, I'm telling you from firsthand experience, from my life, anything I ever say for standing right here is something that I struggle with each and every day. Me, your leaders, David, Kelsey, none of us are different than you. We struggle with this. We deal with this. But again, what now? As we came down from the mountain, as we face life that didn't change, what do we do when we face that furnace? What do we do when everything says you're done? What do we do when all we want to say is, I give up? For some of you in this room, you've sat in your room at night and said, I give up. I just want to end it. I'm sick of it. But when we face that furnace, when we face that fire, when we face that danger, that this is it moment, do we face it with trust and faith? Or do we face it saying, God, why'd you leave? Or God, you were never here? Like I said, tonight as we go to small groups, leaders, if you want to dive into Daniel chapter 3, starts at verse 16. But tonight, as we break down camp, as we break down God being in that fire with us, here's my prayer for all of us, that we would be able to reflect back on a moment in our life where in that moment we said, there's no chance God's here. But I want you to honestly look back, and I promise you, you'll see where God showed up. See, as even just looking at from the time I got married 7 years ago, me and my wife in different jobs, in different seasons, there are moments where I go, I don't know how we're going to pay our bills. I don't know how we're going to survive. We have another kid on the way. And in that moment, it's hard to pray that prayer and say, God, I need you to show up. I believe that you're here. Walk alongside me. Get me through this. It's hard to do that. But we can learn from our own history, and we can look back, and when we notice where God did show up, it helps us for the future. It helps us as we continue to walk to go, I remember that. This is just like it. That's my prayer and encouragement for you guys, is to look back, find where God showed up, find where God was with you in the midst of trials, tribulations, struggles, heartache, whatever that is, and see how God walked alongside you. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for each and every person here, that we would be able to just reflect back on our lives and the moments where we thought everything was over, where we thought that you left us, where we thought that you never were there. And we'd be able to find times that you did show up. We'd be able to find times that you cared for us. You were right there with us, and you said, as you enter this furnace, I'm with you. That we wouldn't feel so alone. To when we turn to our best friend, when we turn to our parents, when our coaches, our small group leaders, and for some reason they can't be there in that moment, that we would know that you are there. I pray for small groups tonight that it would be a safe place to have open conversations, that it would be a safe place for us to truly talk about the furnace that we face. Those moments where we wanted to give up, those moments where we said, God, I'm done. And as we share, that we would know that we're not alone in this, even in those moments, that someone else has been there too. But that we would know that you are with us through it all. That there is another in the fire. There's a cross that bears the burden. God, thank you so much for all that you do and how you love us. pray.